Welcome back to Combat 24/7, Episode 3. How you guys doing? Joined here with Creighton Bauman once again. Pleasure. How you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Hey, can't complain. It's a interesting time, but I'm glad we can still crank these out and talk about what we love to talk about. Um, interesting week of fights. I know we kind of broke down the Walt Harris versus Alistair Overeem card, but yeah, I mean, very questionable judging, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah. It's so unfortunate that this is such a reoccurring issue. And I mean, obviously, no one's, in a lot of those fights, it's hard to definitively say yes or no or one. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely something that I feel like needs to be addressed. And to my knowledge, I haven't heard of anything they're trying to adjust with it. But it's just so unfortunate when you see these fighters that are only getting half their paycheck because they got a judge who's probably never fought before, obviously isn't well versed on MMA. Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I was watching an interview with Ariel Helwani. Edson Barboza fought on Saturday, and he was talking about his next fight with the UFC is dependent on kind of the UFC coming and showing respect to him and kind of, telling him that they thought he won. Is that kind of where the fighters are at? Are they just getting frustrated and kind of like, I need that extra pay because it's just like corrupt?
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want twice your paycheck? Of course. Especially Edson was who I definitely felt for the most because, in my personal opinion, I feel like he definitively won that fight. I'm a huge Dan Ige fan too. I think both of them rightfully belong at the top of their division, but I just think that Edson deserved to get his hand raised. I was super excited for him. I saw he looked healthy. He looked good to go. I still think he's going to do some damage at featherweight, but it's just an unfortunate way to start. And mentally for him, this was kind of his chance to start new. He had fallen on some tough times at lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
Love to see him, get the hand raised and then, you know, emerge on the scene, making a statement. And I still feel like, to fight fans and to the UFC, they saw that clearly he's, deserves the title of one of the best in the world. And, I imagine they'll give him plenty good matchups at featherweight. But, for him, obviously not getting your paycheck or not getting half your paycheck, having to add another L to your name, that's never fun. And, he clearly is doing everything he can, dropping that extra 10 pounds. So you can't help but feel for the guy.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Ige is a tough fight for anyone, but I think out of all the fights, that one was kind of like the most obvious that it would go Edson Barboza's way. It was all around a great card, some good fights. I'm just going to pick out a few and we can kind of talk about them.
Yeah.
Nate Landwehr versus Darren Elkins. That was another fight that, I mean, it was close, but I kind of thought it went Darren Elkins' way. What do you think about that fight, and where do you think those two kind of go next?
Yeah, I agree. That's another one where it's hard to definitively say who won. I can't say I disagree with Landwehr, I believe was pronounced, getting the nod. But the two judges that had it 30-27, that's puzzling because in my personal opinion, I felt like Darren Elkins clearly won round one. Landwehr, I felt round two, and then round three was kind of a toss-up. I could kind of see an argument both ways. But, to see two 30-27s, that was weird. That should not have happened.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to make, predictions on who they're going to fight next. There's so many good matchups at featherweight,
Yeah.
especially since they're not ranked. It's kind of tough to place. But I think the UFC will make some good matchups for them. I definitely don't think Darren Elkins lost any stock. It was a great performance, super close fight. I mean, it could have gone either way, and they're both like savages. Nate Landwehr is going to have a good career in the UFC. Um, Unless he kind of changes up his style of just absolute brawler, I don't think he's going to get past some of the top 10 opponents. What do you think about that?
Yeah, he's got a lot of potential. I know before he came to the UFC, he put on some great performances for, I believe it was M1 Global. So he's got a lot of talent. He's very competitive. He's ferocious. He's exciting. Obviously, Darren Elkins, it's kind of his thing. Even in fights he wins, he's almost guaranteed to get beat up pretty good. So you know you can't necessarily say that he's ready for a ranked opponent. He's definitely on the brink. And if he keeps improving, I could see it in the future. And then for Darren Elkins too, I mean, he didn't get his hand raised, but that was a signature Darren Elkins performance. He got beat up, some cuts and bruises, but he kept coming.
Yeah, would just worry. I mean, Nate Landwehr has a lot of potential, a lot of talent. He's young. What worries me is I saw in that Darren Elkins fight and in the fight against Herbert Burns, he's just getting hit a lot, and that's very dangerous against these top 10 featherweights because they'll put you out and they'll put you out quick. So that kind of worries me, but at the same time, I'm a I'm a grappling what do you call it, armchair grappler. So I'm sure he has the right coaches behind him, and he's going to continue to improve. Um, Kevin Holland versus Anthony Hernandez. Kevin Holland came out of the gate. Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy. He's he's exciting to watch. Even his post fight interviews, it was exciting. Everything about it was exciting. He did not hesitate. I believe he called out Mickey Gall right away.
Which is a good matchup.
Yeah, I'll take it for sure. I don't feel like I've heard much about Mickey Gall lately.
I know he was scheduled to fight Carlos Condit, and that fell through.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a good one to get him back in there.
I agree. That would definitely be a good one. Fun one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen much of Kevin Holland. Um, I haven't seen many of his fights, but wow, he left a statement on me. That's a fighter I'm going to watch every single time from now on. Very exciting fighter. It looked like Anthony Hernandez just kind of looked overwhelmed in there. He's still. Was this his first fight in the UFC, or how many times has Anthony? Do you know?
I do not know. No.
Anthony Hernandez seemed kind of new in the UFC, so maybe it's just one of that feeling out process. Maybe he needs to. It almost looked like Kevin Holland was a little more experienced in there and kind of knew what he was doing off the gate. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Kevin
And
Holland.
he may have just been more comfortable in the environment too. That that's definitely. Obviously I wasn't there, but that's definitely quite a bit of change of pace from probably anything either of those guys have ever done.
Yeah,
Some people might thrive off that, and some people you know, might mess with them mentally.
yeah, absolutely. Next one, Miguel Bieza, Matt Brown. That was for as long as it lasted. That was a super entertaining fight.
For sure, yeah. It looked like Matt had him in the first. Um, yeah, that was a really fun fight. I was really impressed with him. I wasn't very familiar with him at first. I believe he's undefeated.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And Matt Brown's, he's a vet. He's a skilled vet. Um, and he came out strong, but you know, came through, stayed strong, weathered the storm, and put on a great comeback.
Yeah.
That some impressive hands.
Very impressive hands against Matt Brown, who is a great striker. Yeah, he almost put him away early in the first, and then if I'm correct, Miguel almost put him away in the first as well. It was like back and forth, and then Miguel came back and put him away in the second. So that was a super entertaining fight. Um, I'd like to see Miguel. I mean, that's a big step up in competition. So I'd like to see him keep moving up and see what he can do. This fight is where it gets a little dicey, Creighton. Wouldn't you agree? Song Yadong and Marlon Vera. I'm sure you could probably talk about this for an hour. So I'll let you go ahead and take it off.
Yeah. I have to be honest. I'm a big Cheeto Vera fan. So you of course you got to try and keep your bias out of it. And that this is another one. I could see arguments both ways. you could definitely give the first round to Song, and then 2 and 3. I mean, all of them were super duper close. I feel like Chito Vera should have got his hand raised. It is what it is. They're both young, talented guys, so you know, I fully expect them, to climb the rankings at bantamweight and both make statements. Um, that's just another one, Chito Vera got 3 kids at home, young family, and to lose out on half your paycheck. I believe they got fight of the night, so that of course helps. But I mean, regardless, that's got to be tough. And in a
Yeah,
fight, I mean, I understand it could have went either way, but I really feel like Cheeto won that. And Song's another one who got a pretty lenient decision in his last one. It came out to a draw against Cody Stamann, but that was another one where Cody could have definitely got his hand raised.
and Cody should have gotten his hand raised in that one. And I also think Marlon Vera could have gotten his hand raised in this one. I think he should have. But, it's close. So as we kind of go through these fights, we got to kind of somehow make a change because, like, what do you think a proper change is in the judging? Do you think we need more training? Do you think we need accountability? Do you think open scoring? Like, kind of give your take on what do you think the next step is in the UFC? Because UFC is young. It's a very young sport. I mean, MMA, it's a very young sport. UFC is a very young organization.
Yeah, so I heard a lot of rumblings about having old fighters step in as judges, which I understand the logic, but kind of the flaw with that is bias might become relevant. I mean, you sure hope not, but it is hard to say. Some of those guys, maybe they fought each other in the past, or they trained together, or they had a beef against each other. So whatever it may be, that's kind of a slippery slope. um Open judging is something that I think maybe some other promotions, maybe a smaller regional promotion, should definitely try it out. And then the UFC might be able to take notes from them or kind of see how it played out. Obviously, that's beneficial for the fighters. The only kind of risk you run is, should a fighter be up 2 rounds to 1, that third round, you would hate to see them coast. I mean, which is a very realistic reality. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's got to be some sort of training or coaching or even like a test that these judges have to go through. Because something's got to change. It's so unfortunate that this is such a reoccurring problem. And the UFC's it's the only sport on right now. It's should be taken over. Sign that big ESPN deal. I just sure hope that something changes here in the near future.
Yeah, it seems like when it's every fight card, there's outrage about the judging. Um, it seems like something definitely needs to change. With open scoring, of course, you'd have your fighters that coast, but at the same time, you got to realize, the other fighter would be coming for your head because they know they're behind. So it would make for, still interesting fights. Um, I definitely think open scoring is a legitimate option, even if, like you said, the smaller promotions try it out, see how it goes. But I think that's only fair because, in NFL, it's not like, two teams are playing and they're like, I wonder what I'm at. Let's just try to get another touchdown. Like, it seems ridiculous speaking about other sports like that. And to speak about our sport, it's like, it's kind of ridiculous that they don't know the scores, yet they're going into that last round giving it all, even though they might have already lost no matter what. They might still be too far behind on the scorecards. Um, I don't know. It just,
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying. It just seems really weird. And I think there needs to be, I'm an advocate for open scoring. Now, if people don't want to do open scoring, how about having repercussions for bad judging? How about suspensions? Something like that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's just interesting, and maybe just the whole system needs to be rethought. Maybe it doesn't need to be 10-9 rounds. Maybe it needs to be out of 20 or 30. Or not to go on my tangent again, but maybe we can just say, hey, start the timer. no rounds, 10 minutes. Whoever, you know, you would hope that at that 10-minute mark, somebody may have exerted their dominance, but I don't know. That's just, to me, that's always seemed like something maybe worth trying. But it's another thing that maybe we can enroll in a smaller regional promotion. But who knows? I don't know. Obviously, just throwing ideas out there because, you know, moral of the story is there's a lot of flaws in judging. And, you know, you can't necessarily call anybody out, but at the same time, you got to call people out because these fighters are, you know, putting their whole lives into this sport, and you hate to see, you know, a fight get taken away from them.
Yeah, for sure. Also, another option that I've heard people talking about, obviously wouldn't fix it, but it might help it a little, is adding two more judges. So there'd be five judges, so we can get a little more, opinion. Obviously, out of three judges, you can have two terrible judges, but out of five, it might be a little more reasonable that you might be able to have a couple more good judges. So that's always an option. Moving on to the next fight, um, Eric Anders, Christoph Jotko. Christoph looked very good. Um, and Eric Anders, I like the text you sent me. Didn't know Eric Anders was a wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, I understand his approach. On paper, obviously, Jocko's gonna have, you know, more technical striking, but I mean, even, you know, if you're Anders, you got to notice, all right, you spent the first 2 rounds trying for a takedown. It clearly didn't work. I mean, at some point, you have to make a change. You know, that's obviously something him and his corner and team, you know, that's something for them to think about. But yeah, just interesting approach and just kind of overall lack of urgency.
Yeah, and with Eric Anders' hands, he could go out in the third and swing, but maybe he just wanted to stick to the game plan. Maybe it was also Christoph Dacco has hands, so maybe he was kind of protecting himself as well. Um, you know, Wrestling, but that's one decision they got right. So should we cheers to that? They got one right.
Yeah.
Next one, this is probably the one I think they got the most wrong. Dan Ige, Edson Barboza. Dan Ige looked super good, but Edson Barboza just looked better. That's just how it is. In the first round, Edson Barboza dropped Dan Ige. It almost looked like it was going to be stopped. Like I thought he was going to pounce on him and finish it, and it certainly was on its way. But Dan Ige, the professional he is, was able to survive. And then in the second round, then second round, Edson Barboza finished the round with ground and pound. So after that, you're kind of thinking he's 2 rounds up. Didn't you think the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I could understand an argument for both because Ige started the second round real strong. That first round, clear as day, I thought it was Edson Barboza. Ige definitely had the perfect game plan of just coming out and staying on him, not giving him any room, you know, to set up those kicks. Um, but yeah, first round I felt was clearly Edson. That second round, I suppose I could see an argument for both sides. Edson definitely finished in a more dominant position, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, and then the third round, I think what swayed the judges was Danny Gay got a takedown at the end there. So, all around a good fight, but I thought Edson Barboza, personally, I thought Edson Barboza locked up one and two. Um, and I thought he should have deserved the finish. And Edson Barboza isn't really having the greatest luck recently. He had a close one with Paul Felder that I thought he won as well. But this one wasn't as close in my opinion. Obviously, it was close, but it wasn't as close. I thought Edson Barboza convincingly won. Um, but that's the fight game. Sadly, they say don't leave it to the judges, and it shouldn't be that way. But it's truthful. Claudia Gadelia versus Angela Hill. You know how much of a fan I am of Claudia Gadelia, but that's another one that I thought, it was definitely close, but I thought it could have swung the other way pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree. That it's kind of hard to definitively say. You know, it came down to that third round. I felt like Gadea clearly won round one. Hill clearly won round two, and then round three, it was obvious. It was super duper close. This is kind of one where it's, you know, almost hard to say the judges got it wrong or right because there's there's definitely an argument for both sides. I'm also a huge Gadelia fan, but I mean Angela Hill, I don't know. I feel like she was doing more to win in the third. But yeah, that's a tough one. That one, it's you know, and I'm not opposed to draws either. It might sound corny, but at the end of the day, in a fight like that, it's really hard to say that either girl lost. So yeah, like I said, that was a tough one. Definitely could have gone either way. I do respect Gadea calling out Carla Esparza. Obviously, Carla Esparza's last performance wasn't the most exciting thing in the world by any means, but
One was close too.
yeah. Um, but anyways, Gadea calling out Carla Esparza, I respect that because Gadea beat her in a super duper close split decision. So to call someone out who you beat, but there was some controversy around it. That's I feel like that's commendable, and that's a matchup I'm not opposed to.
What do you think about maybe like Angela Hill versus Michelle Watterson?
Yeah, I could see that as well. Angela Hill, I love that she's finally getting. I'd love to see her with a number next to her name. She's like the female cowboy. She's fighting everybody as quick as she can. She just seems like a super cool chick, and just listening to interviews and obviously the Rogan podcast with her, she's relatively super duper new to the sport. So to see the stride she's made in such a short period of time, getting the amount of cage time she has, I would expect to see her uh, make her way to the top of the division. Stay there for a long period of time.
Yeah, for sure. That was a close one. Could have gone either way. I kind of personally felt Angela Hill won, but that third round was too close to call. You can't really blame the judges for that one. You can blame them for everything else. Alistair Overeem, Walt Harris, main event. Very entertaining fight. Obviously, a lot of people kind of rooting for Walt Harris with everything he's been through. Um, Anyone who's a father, even has family, couldn't even fathom what happened to him. So kind of rooting for Walt Harris. He looked good in the first round. He cracked Alistair Overeem with a huge punch, and I'd say if any fight was uh, going to be stopped, it should have been that one. That was super close. Before we get into the result, what do you think? Did you think that should have been stopped in the first round, or do you think it was kind of a fair to let it keep going?
Yeah, obviously it definitely could have, and you could almost factor in, with no crowd there, there's not going to be all that yelling and cheering and excitement. So, I mean, you would hope that it allows the ref to kind of assess the situation. And, obviously, I'm not mad at that he didn't stop it because clearly Alistair had a lot left in the tank. And Alistair, at the end of the day, he's a vet. He's fought everyone, and just about all over the world. So, a lot of respect to him, sticking with it. And, he clearly, remained calm, got everything back in order and, kind of dominated the rest of that fight, which that just shows, the mind and, the mental toughness that Alistair has that's come from fighting for the past 20, 25 years. And, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of fighters would crumble with hits against Walt Harris, but Alistair Overeem remained composed during that, and he came back to have a beautiful head kick in the second round, drop Walt Harris and finish him with punches on the ground. Um, it's sad to see Walt Harris lose that one, but at the same time, I mean, it was a great step for him to get back in the octagon and kind of get his feet wet after what happened. Where do you think Alistair Overeem goes next? I already know who I think, but I'll get your take first.
Yeah. For Alistair, I think I'd like to see him fight Derek Lewis. I mean, somehow they haven't fought. I would almost think that at this point they've both been in the game for so long. You would think that they have, but they haven't. Both coming off wins. They're both right around that top 5 range. So yeah, I think they'd be a good matchup. Obviously, I don't think either of them are one win away from a title shot, but they're definitely, if they can string a couple together, they're definitely in the conversation. And that's, I think someone's going to get put to sleep in that one. I think that'd be exciting. I'd love to see that one.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like a good fight. Personally, I think Alistair Overeem should rematch Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And I think that because not only does Alistair Overeem want that fight, but I think that was a very one-sided fight by Alistair Overeem the whole fight. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik kind of got that one at the end. So I'd like to see him get that one back, especially with Ngannou, pardon me, Jairzinho Rozenstruik coming off such a devastating loss. Uh, I think they kind of it wouldn't be too bad to run that one back.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how both teams kind of game plan for that one. Because obviously that first one was a pretty wrestle-heavy approach from Alistair. So, going into if should they fight again going into that one, you got to assume that Jorginho's, gonna at least have in the back of his mind that Alistair's gonna be going for takedowns or ground and pound. And then, if you're Alistair, obviously he cracked him a few good times in that first fight, so you can't say anything's wrong with Jorginho's chin by any means. But after, going out and, kind of what happened all in that Francis Ngannou fight, that could definitely, we saw it with Francis Ngannou, that played a toll on him mentally. So, be curious to see how Jairzinho bounces back for sure.
Yeah, that was a devastating knockout. Alistair Overeem versus Francis Ngannou and Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Francis Ngannou is something scary, something very
Yeah.
scary. It doesn't matter who you're going against, doesn't matter what skill. It's scary. That's why our transition to our next topic, John Jones and Francis Ngannou are having a little talk, and personally, I think John Jones, that should be the last fight he should take. I don't see much upside to it. You go to a different division and face a very scary number one contender, even though Daniel Cormier is, but I think Francis Ngannou is the fair number one contender in that division. That's scary. What do you think?
Yeah, but, if there's one thing John Jones has made very evident, it's that he's a wild man. Um, I I don't think he's scared of anything. I think he would kind of love the fact that people are thinking that Francis Ngannou is going to be the guy to take him out. And it's an interesting matchup because, John Jones, obviously he doesn't have the big muscles and stuff that you see on Francis, but they've got a relatively similar build as far as length and height. So that'd be interesting. You got to assume John Jones is going to come into that one wrestle heavy and then, probably gas him out. But that first round, no one's safe against Francis Ngannou. But I personally love the fight. If you're John Jones, obviously there's at 205. There's a lot of good contenders, but there may not be a clear cut number one. So you might be able to, step back, let them figure that out. You can jump up to heavyweight. This way we can still see Stipe and DC, and you don't really have to worry about, getting involved and ruining that. I don't know. I personally love the fight.
Don't get me wrong, Creighton. I love the fight. I think it's a scary fight for John because Francis Ngannou, he hits like a truck. And not only that, but I think he's improved on a lot of the other stuff that was lacking in the Stipe Miocic fight. So it's a very scary fight. And also, I think John Jones would take this fight a lot more seriously. But if he got hit like he got hit in the Reyes fight, he's going down. Anybody's going down against Francis Ngannou. He's a big boy, but I think it's an interesting fight. I don't think John Jones is a heavy favorite in that. I think it really could go either way. John Jones has shown that he has a great chin, but Francis Ngannou's a different animal. How do you see that one playing out? Who are you leaning towards?
All I'm saying is if the odds are very close, or should Francis even be the favorite, I'm betting the house on John. I just think he's too skilled. He's too crafty. His fight IQ is too high. I think he's going to be able, I think he's going to have obviously at Jackson Rink, they're going to develop the perfect game plan for him. And like I said, I think after that first round, it's obviously Francis hasn't gone out of the first round, and that that illustrates how powerful he is. But after that first round, it's hard to imagine that he's going to be able to carry that same power. So I think John Jones is going to be able to put together the perfect game plan. Evade those big shots, maybe get him to the ground. I think he takes that one.
Yeah, but obviously it could go either way. That one's a dangerous fight for John, but it's also a dangerous fight for Francis Ngannou. John is very crafty, and you can see against Daniel Cormier when he has a tough opposition against him, he goes full force, and you can kind of see when he maybe underestimates people, Alexander Gustafsson and Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes. He kind of doesn't bring all he has. So I think Francis would definitely have a handful in that one. Uh, do you think maybe match up a interim title while he's doing work at heavyweight, or just kind of have a number one contenders fight?
I, you know, Similar to the whole BMF thing, I think this is one that, enough fans want to see. They know it's going to sell like crazy. And, I don't think they necessarily have to put a name or a title on this one specifically. I feel like it's pretty clear that both DC and Stipe probably going to hang it up after their next fight. So in a way, without specifically naming it the championship fight, this in a way you could say that is the championship fight because you assume the winner of that is eventually going to probably fight for an interim title after that trilogy between DC and Stipe. So yeah, I don't think they necessarily have to put any big names on it. Obviously, everyone's going to want to see it. It's going to do great numbers. It's exciting for both fighters. I would love the fight.
You certainly answered another one of my questions, but I think I worded it wrong. Would you like to see an interim title at 205 while John is at heavyweight?
I mean, it all kind of depends on, maybe John just wants to dip his toes in and, fight Francis and then might want to jump back down. Um, and it's kind of hard. I don't know. I don't see who would fight for interim at 205. Obviously there's a lot of names, but I think the pinpoint two would be tough.
I think this is just my opinion, but I think you do Teixeira versus Santos, and then you do Reyes versus Jan for the interim.
I mean, yeah, all possibilities. I don't know. I think as long as John's not in trouble with the law, I don't think he's going to want to have to deal with, um, having to give up that 205 spot. That's just my personal opinion. I could see it happening, but I think the competitor John is. I don't think he wants while he's active. I don't think he wants to see another name with gold around their waist at 205.
Yeah. So let's say in a fantasy world, but a very realistic world, but hypothetically that DC beats Stipe and John beats Francis. Is it almost impossible to deny that trilogy? Can DC really say no? That just sets up a perfect trilogy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's hard to step into DC's mind to know his thoughts on it. I mean, I'm sure the UFC would back up the Brinks for him, but I don't know. I mean, I think he's got a lot going on already. Coaching at AKA, coaching for Gilroy, commentating for the UFC. He's got a show with Ariel now. I think he's ready to kind of embrace that retired life. He's already in his 40s. Obviously that fight wouldn't happen for a little while.
Right.
At the end of the day, I mean, I feel like John definitively won both fights, regardless of what was in his system. I don't know. I that one's tough to call. I think there's a few matchups that have to play out first before we can jump to that one.
Yeah, for sure. Switching over to AKA, first off, want to send my thoughts and prayers to Khabib Nurmagomedov and his father. Reports
Of
came out
course.
that he underwent heart surgery and he had complications due to coronavirus. Very sad stuff. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe he's in a coma right now, a medically induced coma. So very sad stuff. Hope he recovers. Prayers to him.
Of course.
Um, I do want to bring up one of your favorite fighters, sarcasm, of course, Conor McGregor. You know, like him or hate him, there's a lot of options he
Yeah.
has. In the, there's a lot of options he has going forward. Um, Clearly, nobody wishes this upon Khabib, but if his father's health continues to decline, who says that he'll be ready in September? You know, that's a very tough thing to go through, and you might want to take some time off. So it kind of opens up an opportunity for Conor and Gaethje. Am I mistaken in that?
This is, I might not be the perfect person to talk to on this issue because I'll come up straightforward and say I'm gonna have bias. I I just am not a huge fan of Conor McGregor or his antics. But if I'm the UFC and I don't know why this hasn't happened yet, you why why are McGregor and Masvidal not fighting? That just seems like a
I'll
no.
tell you why. I'll tell you why, Creighton. That fight is a fight in the making. We need some things to happen before that can happen. Right now, if you do that fight, it's a huge fight. But if things go right and you do it a little later, it'll be even bigger.
What do you need to go right?
Well, Masvidal is a very skilled fighter, and obviously, I think Usman is going to be a favorite. But I think he has a possibility of beating Usman. If he beats Usman and it's for the welterweight strap, I think it's a much bigger fight. And you may disagree with me because obviously titles aren't everything, but I'd have to say tuning in to see Conor McGregor have a chance winning the welterweight championship after he's already won two other titles, I think that makes it a lot bigger. Plus, Masvidal versus Usman is going to get a lot of eyes that it hasn't seen before.
Yeah, a couple things. First, from what I understand, the UFC is not trying to book Usman Masvidal. It sounds like a few things fell through and it's not going to work out. The other thing to think of is Woodley and Gilbert Burns are scheduled to fight the 30th. Should Woodley come out on fire and finish Burns? Kind of hard to not give, whatever he is, 4 or 5 time world champ, another shot. Obviously, that first fight was very one-sided, but I think he definitely deserves a rematch if he can make a statement the 30th. So I think him and Usman is a very real possibility. And last thing is McGregor just hasn't done enough to warrant a title shot at 70. I mean, it's one thing when he was at 45 to jump up to 55 because obviously he climbed the ranks at 45. He called the shots right, and he got his shot at 55. But at 70, he fought Cowboy at 70, who isn't ranked, isn't even a true 70 pounder. And, the to just jump over all the tough guys at 70 doesn't make sense in my opinion. Even when he fought Nate Diaz, Nate's obviously been in and out of the rankings, but clearly doesn't warrant a title shot over the Killers at 170. And I I don't think, I I struggle to imagine that the UFC is going to try and sell him and Usman, so I don't really consider that just because that's a terrible matchup for him.
Conor and Masvidal is a huge fight. But I think Conor still has stuff to do at 55. I think he wants Conor hasn't done much at 55. He won the belt off of Eddie, he lost to Khabib, and that's all, right? So I think he has more to do there. And that's why Conor and Justin make huge sense if Khabib can't fight till next year. If Conor's able to win the interim title off of Justin, and then even if he loses to Khabib, Masvidal is still a huge fight. It's a ginormous fight. And as far as you saying it's not fair for Conor to skip over all the 170s, I agree. But the UFC doesn't think like you, Creighton, or else the UFC would be a legitimate organization. The UFC sees money, and they're not going to turn down Conor versus Masvidal for the belt.
How about just do it for the BMF belt? We didn't they already make a they already made a belt so that we could have stuff like this happen. I just
The
think
reason the,
great matchup.
the reason I'm saying that I want Usman and Masvidal to fight first is because I still think Conor has stuff to do at 155. I don't think his business is finished there, and I think Usman versus Masvidal is the fight to make. Now, obviously, they're saying they want to go a different route, but you can't avoid that fight forever. Maybe they're talking about Masvidal Colby. I don't know, but if I was Masvidal, I'd rather fight Usman for the belt. Colby is a freaking hell of a fight, tough opponent. Probably just as tough as Usman. So if I'm Masvidal, I'd rather be fighting for the title at least. Obviously, he wants to shut Colby up, but I'd rather be fighting for the title. Um, so it's very interesting where you go next. Obviously, I don't agree with Conor going against Masvidal, which I think is his second toughest matchup, right after he beats Cowboy Cerrone. No disrespect to Cowboy, but Masvidal's on a different level. I think the only matchup tougher than him is Khabib. I think Conor needs to stay at 55 and either fight Tony, Dustin, or Gaethje. I'm kind of leaning versus Gaethje, and if Gaethje can't fight, do Dustin. Dustin versus Conor is a great fight, and if he beats Dustin, who just fought for the title, at that point you can't really deny him that he's up there.
I agree.
So if your aim is to take Conor McGregor and kind of make him earn his way, beating Dustin would be a great way to earn his way.
That is true. Yeah, that 125 division is interesting. I think one name you got to throw in there, Charles Oliveira, because man, he looked phenomenal in his last outing. I would love to see, off the top of my head, I think him and Tony would be fireworks. But yeah, I think that's someone who you gotta throw into the mix. As far as Dustin and Conor, I agree. I think it makes sense, but like you were saying, the UFC's after money, and I just don't know. I don't know. I don't see Conor really wanting that fight. Of course, Dustin is gonna want it. He's gonna want to get some revenge, but I don't see the UFC pursuing that. So yeah, from what I understand, the rumors are Khabib is regardless. He plans on fighting in September against Justin. So we can hope we hope that's the plan going forward. But yeah, whole lot of confusion. Both those 55 and 70 are kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah, just personally, I don't think it's a smart move for Conor to go to 70 right now. Because let's say he beats Masvidal, where can you really go next? You don't want to fight Usman. Usman's the worst matchup. He's like Khabib but bigger. That's a terrible matchup. Usman would swarm him, and it wouldn't be good for him. You saw the shots that Usman took against Colby, and obviously Colby isn't the power puncher Conor is, but Usman surely has a chin on him. So I think if Conor goes to 70 and then wins, there's not really much for him to to do. I mean, I don't know what's next for him, but I think he should focus on 55. I think a good matchup is definitely Dustin. Um, he's a striker. He's probably not going to take you down. He's going to want to stand and bang with you. Um, Tony's a terrible matchup. Tony is like I would avoid Tony. I'd do Conor Dustin and then Tony. No disrespect to Oliveira, but I think Tony deserves a higher matchup than that. So I think you kind of wait till the dust settles and then give Tony one of the losers of the top rank opponents. Um, I could even see like Khabib and Gaethje fight, and if Khabib gets the upside, you do a rematch of Tony and Gaethje. I mean, who wouldn't pay to see that fight again? So
Yeah.
there's a lot to do. As far as Alex Oliveira or Charles Oliveira, my bad. There's so many Oliveras on the UFC. Can we skim them down? No, but as far as Charles Oliveira, I think the right matchup is Paul Felder. Do I think Paul Felder is going to accept that? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess Paul Felder he's coming off a loss, so I don't know who they would pair him up with.
I think that's the right fight to make.
I could see it, but I don't see the UFC pursuing it. I know Felder recently, he was kind of been vocal about he's not really in it just to fight everyone. He wants to fight the matchups that interest him or the matchups that are going to get him to the belt. And I just don't see him interested in an Oliveira matchup because I mean at the end of the day, Oliveira is a nightmare for pretty much everybody in that division. And he doesn't quite have the name, so should he beat Oliveira, it's not necessarily enough to jump him into title contention. I don't know. That's bottom line. I think Oliveira is. I think he's a dark horse of that division.
Yeah, I don't see really a good matchup for Paul Felder if he wants to, like, with where he's at in the rankings. To get closer to title contention, you kind of have to fight up, and he's coming off of a loss, so it's tough. Obviously, a very close loss against Dan Hooker. Um,
I guess I could see him and Kevin Lee maybe, but I suppose Kevin Lee's taking some time off. I heard he had surgery.
yeah, maybe like what do you think about Dan Hooker and Charles Oliveira?
I could see it. I guess. I guess I don't know if they're planning to go forward at all with Hooker and Poirier because
That's
I still think that would be a fun matchup.
that's a scary fight for Hooker, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any other? We covered a lot in the lightweight division. Is there any other kind of topics that are floating on your mind recently?
Obviously the news today of Gilbert Burns and Woodley. I think that has potential to be a fun matchup. Could be coming out party for Woodley or Burns, or it could be it's a great chance for Woodley to show, you know, the world champ that he was, and how good he really is.
Yeah. Um, Woodley has done a lot in the division, but I got to disagree with you that he's next if he wins this. Obviously, he was one of the best welterweight champions, but Gilbert Burns isn't exactly the fight that you win and then go straight to a title shot. I think he still needs to face Leon Edwards. I think that's the fight. I think Woodley versus Leon Edwards and Colby versus Masvidal.
Yeah, I love Colby Masvidal. I think a fun matchup would be Wonder Boy and Leon Edwards. Both coming off wins. Both longer, lanky guys at 70. You know, I think that's a fun matchup. I think that's a real good test for Edwards because obviously that's as far as stand up goes, no one really has ever looked good against Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy looked phenomenal at 244. So I think that'd be an interesting matchup.
Do you think that's a tough sell to put Woodley back in there against Usman?
I don't know. I mean, it depends. I hate to say what Woodley shows up, but ultimately what Woodley shows up because he's looked. There's a reason he's four-time world champ. But at the end of the day, he has had some lackluster performances. Obviously, that Usman was, stands out to everybody because it was so recent and it was, so dominant. But anyone who defends their belt four times, regardless of whether or not they're entertaining fights or if he sold a lot of pay-per-views, I think you gotta respect and honor that, especially at a division where I don't feel like Masvidal is warranted a title shot. It's hard to sell Colby because he's coming off a loss. I think both Wonder Boy and Edwards are a solid win away. I don't know. I think if he's able to come out, put a statement on it, maybe get a first or second round finish, then I personally I'd be all for that rematch.
Certainly, I can't argue. There's so much to do in that 170 pound division. Certainly, you got to throw Michael Chiesa in the mix, right?
Sure.
He
And Jeff
look
Neal as well. I think both those guys they're going to be pretty big names in 170 for a while.
Neal's a beast. Him against Price, and then him against Mike Perry didn't even stand a chance. Mike Perry just got lit up. So very interesting. Where do you think Michael Chiesa goes next after his win over RDA?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know Jeff Neal has been calling him out for quite a while. Ponzinibbio is another one who he's on a great streak. He's got a phenomenal record, but obviously he dealt with a pretty intense staph infection and he's been sidelined for almost a couple of years now. Um, so he's definitely an interesting name as well. But a matchup for Chiesa I'd love to see is him and Neil Magny. Both very long, lanky guys. Both good, or I guess I'd give the advantage to Chiesa in the grappling. But either way, Neil Magny looked phenomenal at 248. That's a matchup I'd love to see. I think rankings wise, it makes enough sense, and I think that's a fan friendly matchup.
Yeah, and then what do you do next with Neil? Because obviously he had a dominant performance against Mike Perry.
Yeah, he's another one. I guess I don't know the return time for Ponzinibbio, but I think both of them, coming off wins, that's a matchup I would love to see.
What about Luque Neil?
Yeah, that would be fun for sure. Yeah, he's an interesting one because he's very well rounded and he fights a lot, so I could definitely see them looking for something like that.
Yeah, 170-pound division, 155-pound division. There's endless possibilities, really. Those are the two most stacked divisions. 145 is certainly up there.
Yeah.
Um, obviously, Henry Cejudo retired, as we saw. Do you believe him?
I do. I really do. Retiring from MMA, yes. Do I think he might, venture into something else? Martial arts wise, I could see it happening. But I mean, when you think about Henry Cejudo's career, everything he set out to do, he's became the best in the world in. He started wrestling when he was young, became an Olympic champ. He started fighting, went on to beat arguably the one of the best MMA fighters of all time. Obviously, it was a close decision, but that was an amazing performance. Then he defended the belt at 25. Then he bumps up, puts on another crazy good performance against Moraes, wins the 35 belt, and then goes out and finishes arguably the best 35 pounder of all time. Obviously, from the UFC, making a matchup between him and Volkanovski isn't something I'm looking to do. So for him, why not? What more do you have to do? I could maybe see him, venturing into maybe a submission grappling or whatever it may be. I think that there is a competitor in him, so he'll find something to occupy himself with. But I do think as far as mixed martial arts goes, I think unless there's an amazing matchup proposed or, $1 million payday proposed, I see him calling it quits.
Yeah, I think the whole issue came down to money. The UFC could only offer him X amount of money, and he felt like he was worth more. But obviously, he wasn't pulling in the pay-per-views to match up for it. I think he would definitely come back to a huge payday, but I just don't see a fight that warrants a huge payday for him. I mean, you have Peter Yan, you have Aljamain Sterling, tons of 135ers, but to be fair, they're not that big. They're not that big of names. And as you mentioned, Volkanovski, he's a decent name, but he has his hands full with the 145-pound division. And then 125, there's not really much to do there. So I think it's fair that he leaves, but I do think he'll come back. I think he'll come back when the matchup warrants.
Can't say I'd be surprised, but I don't know. At least at the moment, I struggle to see what that matchup may be, and I don't see the UFC wanting to pay him what he wants.
Yeah. Well, we've had a long podcast here. It's been a lot of good topics. I just want to finish up with this. UFC 250. Is that card done? Are you telling me Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer is the main event?
I would not be surprised if that's the main event. But as far as the rest of the card goes, I think they're obviously gonna get, I mean, you would imagine or hope that they're gonna beefing it up a little bit. Um, yeah, I don't know. They can't realistically imagine they're gonna sell any pay-per-views with that card. Which, no disrespect to those fighters, they're just, maybe not the names that you'll see typically on a pay-per-view. Especially after a card like 249. And it's 3 week. Even the May 30th card, that's not a full lineup yet. So I would imagine they're gonna find some good names to throw in there, and they'll get it figured out.
Yeah. Do you know where that fight's supposed to be? Or do you know where they're
Um,
targeting?
so from what I understand, the UFC, their goal is to get it at the Apex Center in Vegas. Vegas hasn't given them the okay yet for sure. It sounds like they might. Obviously, if they do, the Apex Center would be perfect. 'Cause then they don't have to pay for a venue. They can isolate the fighters, get them in and out. That would be perfect. But from what I understand, if Vegas says no, then they're going to go down to Arizona.
Okay. Yeah, that I kind of look at that, and from the UFC business point of view, no offense to Felicia Spencer and Amanda Nunes, but they're certainly not going to pull in very many pay-per-views at all. So you want to know a stacked co-main event to throw on there that'll sell a ton?
What's that?
Jorge Mas. No, no, you probably have to main event that, don't you?
I was going to say he's not. They're not going to throw him in.
What do you do with Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington? Like, what card? Do you put that on a pay-per-view, or do you do? You can't do a fight night, right? Does that have to be? Can you main event that on a pay-per-view, or is that a co-main?
I don't know. Well, what I personally would love, which I don't think it happens, but let me dream. Um, from what I understand, they're supposed to be bringing back the Ultimate Fighter. That would be the most awesome season ever. Obviously, those two are going to be John back and forth the whole time.
Plus,
But would imagine Masvidal is going to throw quite a few punches over the duration of the show. I think that would be perfect. I don't see him signing up for it. Um, but if I'm the UFC, that's what I'm trying to make happen, because obviously that's just gonna, snowball into the gigantic mega fight that they might be able to have headline a pay-per-view.
yeah. Plus the skills those two have to offer as coaches, like that would be such a phenomenal season. I don't think Colby would make it out of that season untouched. Certainly,
I was gonna say, I imagine that there's gonna be some words said and
you
maybe
need some security in those in the apex for sure. A lot of security, but there's so many good fights to make, and there's just like not enough room to make it. So that's what I'm thinking. Like UFC 250, like throw another big fight on there. But what would you throw on there? What would be a co-main event that you can even make?
yeah, it's I don't know. It's tough to know who's all training, who's ready to fight right now. Um, Obviously, short notice is not ideal for, but in times like this, this could be the perfect chance for someone, who is maybe not a relatively big name to make a big name for themselves. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't be surprised if, Cowboy gets in there somehow. Maybe not the co-main, but I could see him throwing his name in the hat and them saying, "Sure, we'll find someone for you."
He's nuts.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
That man's gonna die fighting. You got to believe that.
One fight off the top of my head that I was thinking about it today, that I would love would be Robbie Lawler and Mike Perry. You know,
Everybody wants to see me fight Robbie Lawler.
yeah, I think that's a fun matchup. Both coming off, you know, some pretty definitive losses. Both kind of got whooped in their last fight, but both brawlers. It's going to be exciting. That's a fight I would love to see for sure.
Okay.
But on
Awesome.
250.
I think this has been a great podcast. It was great catching up with you. Any CBD sponsors out there, certainly hit us up. We can't be an MMA podcast without CBD sponsors, but
Of course.
Brayden Bauman, thanks once again. Hope to do this again soon. And thank you to all the viewers. Please stay safe during this time. and enjoy the May 30th card.
It was a pleasure. God bless everyone.
Peace.